Hello and welcome to the very first episode of Game & Drink on our brand new channel, Content by Volume. I'm your host, Cal Floydian, and the ultimate goal of this show is to inform and celebrate two things that are greatly misunderstood and underappreciated: beer and video games. It may be a novel idea for most people, but for us, beer and video games are at the very core of who we are. We've enjoyed both as individual hobbies, as well as combined the two for a singular experience that would inspire us and later define who we are. We were just a bunch of guys hanging out, drinking beers and playing games. We discussed our favorite beers as much as we discussed our favorite games. It was a conversation of passion, and it got to the point that it was all we would ever talk about. But the conversation stopped there in our circle, and we wanted to share our experience with more people, so we decided to create this channel for just that purpose. Now that you know what this channel is and what to expect from it, allow me to introduce the inaugural pairing of Ballast Point's Victory at Sea and Chivalry Medieval Warfare by Torn Banner Studios. Chivalry Medieval Warfare, developed by Torn Banner Studios, lets us live out our childhood fantasy of becoming a valiant knight in the days of nobles and peasants, fighting for your honor and that of your king on the field of battle, coming down with the plague, and generally being pretty miserable. Unlike many games that revolve around the medieval setting, Chivalry takes a different approach by offering a sense of gritty realism. What Chivalry does is place us in a fictional world full of strife where man fights man. There are no fictional beasts or gods, just mortals spilling blood in the name of their kings. Initially releasing on PC in late 2012, Chivalry would later see a release on both Xbox 360 and PS3. For our review, we're playing the PC version, which can be purchased through Steam. Priced at $25, the game often sees a discount, putting the game up for grabs around $5, sometimes even less. Chivalry is set in a fictional world that resembles the Middle Ages and follows the kingdom of Agatha. The story goes that King Argon, after years of warring, has finally united the kingdom of Agatha under his banner and is now ready to go subjugate other foreign lands. Unbeknownst to King Argon, his distant cousin Malric is amassing an elite unit of his own under the banner of the Mason Order and is secretly plotting to overthrow him and take the kingdom for his own. King Argon and his troops are completely unprepared for the harsh foreign environments and are severely weakened. King Argon eventually dies in battle, and this prompts his cousin Malric to return home and seize the throne for his own. Malric starts spreading a bunch of rumors about the Agatha Knights in hopes to ruin their reputation. The Agatha Knights now return home, torn and battered, to find the resistance from the Mason Order and many of the kingdom's subjects. The two factions now take to the field of battle, locked in civil war, and you as the player must choose which leader you will swear fealty to and fight for their cause. Chivalry is a game in which the player locks into combat with his enemy, slashing, bashing, thrusting, parrying, and blocking an onslaught of attacks, all while managing your stamina and health in order to come out alive and ready to press on to the next battle. The combat is comprised of varying types of attacks ranging from swift strikes to heavy blows, all of which has a very specific timing that dictates the momentum of battle. Each attack has a specific wind-up time and animation that keys the player in on when to parry, block, or press an attack. These attacks and defenses hinge on the player's stamina gauge, as almost every action results in its depletion. Mindlessly sprinting into battle and mashing buttons is a quick way to end up in one of the many piles of corpses littering the battlefield. There are several game modes in Chivalry, but our experiences revolve mostly around Last Team Standing and Team Objective, as we believe them to be the best two modes that the game has to offer. The first, Last Team Standing, has a very simple goal: stay alive and kill the other team. Once the last man on the opposing team dies, the round is over. Okay, the premise sounds that simple, but this mode relies heavily on teamwork and even class distribution. The other game mode, Team Objective, revolves around one team attacking and the other defending. One of the teams must complete various objectives ranging from destroying walls and plundering villages to killing peasants, while the other team has to defend from the oncoming attacks. Once in the game, the player chooses either the Agatha Knights or the Mason Order and picks one of 4 classes, each class being identical between the two factions. First up, we have the Archer. The only ranged unit in the game, you'll find the Archer acting much like snipers in many other games, harassing other players from afar. Pick this guy if you want to annoy other players and pretty much be hated across the match. Next up, we have the Man-at-Arms. An equally annoying class, the main gimmick of this character is his ability to leap in and out of the range of the enemy rather quickly. You know the Fleeman enemies from Castlevania series? Do you remember the damn things being at the perfect height to fuck up, but as soon as you attack, your whip flies right over their head? Man-at-Arms is essentially that. Moving on to a more well-rounded class, and my personal favorite, we have the Mighty Vanguard. With a variety of weapons with incredibly long reach and the strength to put weight behind his swings, the Vanguard can easily mow through waves of enemies. Since most of the Vanguard's weapons have such long reach, they often have long sweeping attacks that strike out in 180 degrees in front of them. You might want to be wary of your surroundings though. You may end up putting a blade of your halberd in your teammate's neck. Then you'll be hated just as much as the archer. The final class is the heavy-handed, damage-absorbing knight. Heavily armored and wielding massive shields with great ease, the knight can defend his companions without even flinching. The knight is so strong that he will always commit to his swings, even if he's struck by another sword or an arrow. The knight doesn't give two fucks about you or your sword. All he knows is that you need to die, and you need to die now. He is a bit slow, so you may want to watch out for some of those fleamen. The beer we chose to pair in this episode is Victory at Sea from Ballast Point's Brewing and Spirit out of San Diego, California. Victory at Sea is an imperial porter weighing in at 10% ABV and 60 IBUs. Once a seasonal release, this beer is now available all year round and even has a holiday dedicated to it, Victory at Sea Day. The pitch black color of this beer is complemented by a fluffy caramel head that holds fairly well. It's dominated with the roasty and smoky aroma of coffee with subtle hints of vanilla and alcohol underneath. Upon first sip, you're met with the bitter of the alcohol that gives way to the roasty and smoky flavor we smelled before. As the bitter spreads across your tongue, notes of vanilla fade into focus, and soon the flavor is reminiscent of chocolate. It all ends with a nice coffee aftertaste. Being an imperial porter, Victory at Sea is a heavier beer and it has a much thicker mouthfeel, somewhere between the heaviest and lighter styles. It also has, I feel, just the right amount of carbonation and the bubbles fade just as the initial onset of the coffee comes into focus. The highlight of this beer is the fact that it is brewed with vanilla as well as coffee beans from San Diego's Cafe Calabria. If you're a coffee lover, you'll definitely love this beer, as it has a nice balance that you won't often find in coffee-saturated Java stouts. Chivalry is a game that is easy to understand but will take time to fully grasp how the mechanics work in order to become fluent in expertly distributing death to your enemies. Conversely, Victory at Sea is smooth and welcoming to the palate, and it becomes instantly clear how good this beer really is. At times you'll forget that this beer packs a walloping 10% ABV punch. It is the subtlety of Victory at Sea's underlying brutality that plays well with the fast, anxiety-inducing, visceral gameplay of Chivalry. From the moment you spawn onto the battlefield alongside your brothers in arms, you're stricken with the jitters of excitement underlaced with the tensions of fear onset by the implications of mortal combat that will shortly ensue. Marching across the battlefield at the precipice of contact, you take a swig of your beer. The bitter coffee notes incite your thirst for blood and you ready your weapon. As the first enemy comes into view, the bitterness fades into sweeter tones, settling on the alcohol as it spreads across your tongue, stealing your nerves from the anticipation of the ring of steel. You charge in right behind your companion as he squares off with his opponent, looking for the falter in the enemy's step so they can deliver a lethal blow. The bitterness of the beer begins to take over as you close the distance, your ally occupying the opponent, finding the route to their backside. As your companion's sword meets with his opponent's in a clash of metal, your weapon finds the soft, unarmored flesh of their backside in a satisfying splash of blood. Your opponent is taken aback and turns to quickly defend from his newfound threat and prepares to evade, but it's too late. Your weapon finds its opening and a geyser of blood erupts from the stump where his head once was. As their body slumps to the floor in a satisfying thud, you take another swig of your beer, the sweetness resonating with your victory. The full, thick, and sticky body of the beer parallels your enemy's blood that now soaks the battlefield before you. The sight is as sweet as the vanilla that lines the porter. This beer complements the game extremely well. The black color coincides with the dark themes of civil war, plague, and bloodshed in the world of Agatha. The clash of two factions pairs well with the contrast between the bitter of the coffee and the sweetness of the vanilla. The overall thickness of the beer invokes the thought of the amount of bloodshed and gore the game provides. Luckily for us, the beer isn't as chunky as the piece of human matter being flung about. We also thoroughly enjoy the raw mechanics of the game. Managing your stamina and timing attacks to ensure that you won't end up with an axe sticking out of your head can be very rewarding, and what better way to complement this than with the bitter kick you get from the coffee and the beer. Chivalry is undoubtedly a spectacular game with fast-paced action that can easily keep you entertained for hours. It's one of the few games that we would consistently come back to almost every weekend. Our favorite aspect of the game is the combat, of course, as it is the game's bread and butter. Its simplicity makes it approachable to any player who's a veteran of action games. Because the game's been out for a while, you will oftentimes encounter many veteran players. Meeting even one of these players is sure enough to ruin your evening. They understand the mechanics so well that they can manipulate their avatar to ensure that their weapon will 100% make contact with you. Parrying? Nope, that sword is nowhere near where you were aiming. Blocking with your shield? Nah, let me just contort my body around it. It isn't just other players though, as you can be met with frustration when you fumble with the controls. At times, input seems a bit unresponsive, and instead of parrying or raising your shield to defend, you end up standing there like a practice dummy while your opponent gets in some free hits. The only other major gripe we have with the game is a lack of teamwork. There is no in-game VoIP, and chat takes too long for it to be a viable tool for coordinating efforts. Is TeamSpeak too advanced a technology for the Middle Ages that it couldn't be implemented? Well, I guess text or keyboard wasn't. For most games we played, every player just did as they wanted, sometimes completely ignoring the objective. There will inevitably be a group of friends that end up on the same team working together, and honestly this can be the difference between victory and total defeat. The graphics in Chivalry aren't the best, but they aren't too distracting. The game overall can be a bit dark at times, but I can see where they're going with the art direction. Character animations can seem a bit stiff and not as dynamic as more polished titles would be, but again not distracting. Plus, the game does a pretty damn good job when it comes to the gore system, and it's pretty satisfying to remove someone's head or arm from their body. Luckily, if you die early in last team standing, you have to wait for the round to end before you can begin playing again. This gives you more than enough time to sit back, enjoy your beer, and watch as your team struggles to carry on without you. Though it's probably not the best thing for the team, you can damage teammates to add respawn time when you die during all other game modes. Overall, Chivalry is a great game to add to your library, and you can be sure that you'll get your money's worth from it, especially if you're playing with friends. I'd have to say that Victory at Sea is one of my favorite beers, and it being a year-round release, it's often one of my many go-tos. Like most Ballast Point beers, it is on the higher side in terms of price, sometimes costing up to $16 for a 6-pack. Of course, as you may be aware, they were sold to Constellation, so who knows, maybe the price will come down with the quality. Victory at Sea may be an awesome beer for us veterans, but I don't think I could recommend it freely to non-beer lovers or newbies to the hobby. As with higher ABV beers and often with stouts and porters, it may be a bit too heavy for them. Its higher ABV also doesn't make this a very good beer for other slower paced games where you can sip it more often. A good balance comes from the faster paced games where you're only afforded an opportunity during rare downtimes. This is another reason that the beer pairs well with this game. By the end of the night, we're only 3 beers in when we finally give up. And with a 10%, that's usually enough. And there you have it, our very first pairing of Ballast Point's Victory at Sea and Chivalry Medieval Warfare by Torn Banner Studios. Go ahead and like or dislike the video depending on how you feel, and leave a comment down below. Let us know what you thought about the episode and leave any ideas that you may want to see in future episodes.